The buyer was 10 minutes away, and the realtor offered me $500 to take down a sign that said no trespassing. The sign was on my side of the property line. The tire tracks were on my side of the property line. The portable toilet had been on my side of the property line. And the city case number taped under the sign was not decorative. My name is Nora. I was 34, I owned a small brick house at the end of a quiet street, and I learned the expensive way that some people think an empty piece of grass is free if the owner is polite. I was polite for almost 3 weeks. That was my mistake. I bought the house 4 years earlier because it was boring in the best possible way. It had 1 floor, old hardwoods, a deep front yard, and a porch wide enough for 2 chairs and a small table. The previous owner had been meticulous. He gave me a folder at closing with appliance manuals, paint colors, warranties, and a copy of the boundary survey. Most people would have thrown the survey into a drawer and forgotten it. I did not. My father was a civil engineer, and he raised me to respect 2 things: water flow and property lines. He used to say that fences are emotional, but surveys are math. So I scanned the survey, saved the paper copy, and kept the closing folder in a file cabinet in my laundry room. I did not expect to need it. I just liked knowing where things were. That folder was one of those boring adult things that seems excessive until it is the only reason a stranger cannot rewrite your life. It had my deed. It had the title insurance papers. It had the inspection report. It had the survey with the little black line between 116 and 118 Meadow Lane. The line looked harmless on paper, just a straight mark from the sidewalk back to the rear fence. In real life, that line ran through grass. That was the trap. Grass makes people casual. Nobody would drive a loader across a brick wall. Nobody would set a portable toilet on a kitchen floor and say it was just near the line. But grass makes some people think they are borrowing space instead of taking it. Before Darren bought the house next door, the line had never been an issue. The old owner kept 2 planters near her side porch and waved at me when I got the mail. I mowed my side. Her nephew mowed hers. Once, after a storm, a branch fell across both yards, and we cut it together without anyone needing a document. That is how normal neighbors handle things. But normal neighbors ask first. The house next door had been empty for nearly a year when the flippers bought it. It was a yellow ranch with cracked shutters, a sagging carport, and a yard that had gone mostly to weeds. I was happy when someone finally bought it. Empty houses attract problems, and I wanted a neighbor more than I wanted another quiet lot. The buyer was an LLC with a forgettable name. The face of it was a man named Darren, who introduced himself by leaning over my mailbox while I was carrying groceries. He said, "We're going to make this street look a lot better." I said, "Great. Let me know if you need anything." I meant it. He did not hear the sentence the way I meant it. To me, "Let me know if you need anything" meant if a truck had to block the curb for 15 minutes, text me first. If a delivery needed a place to turn around, ask. If dust or noise got out of hand, communicate like a person who expected to keep working next to other people. To Darren, I think it sounded like permission. Not legal permission. Not written permission. Just the soft social permission some people think they get from a woman who smiles on the sidewalk. That became the pattern. He would take a little more than he asked for. Then act surprised when I noticed. At the beginning, I wanted the project to go well. I did not care if they painted the house gray or white or whatever color people think makes a house worth $40,000 more. I cared that they did not block my driveway, crush my yard, or treat my property like their staging area. For the first few days, the work was just loud. Old cabinets came out. A dumpster arrived. Trucks lined the curb. Men in work boots walked back and forth with boards, tile boxes, and fast food cups. I work from home 2 days a week, so I heard most of it. Still, I told myself it was temporary. The first real problem was my driveway. One of the subcontractors parked across the bottom of it while I was trying to leave for a dentist appointment. I walked over and asked him to move. He smiled like I was being adorable and said, "I'll only be 10 minutes." I said, "I need to leave now." He looked annoyed, but he moved. That afternoon, I emailed Darren. "Hi Darren, one of your subcontractors blocked my driveway this morning. Please make sure crews keep my driveway clear." He replied 20 minutes later. Sorry about that. Construction gets messy, but we'll try to keep things moving. Try. That word told me a lot. It told me he saw the blocked driveway as inconvenience, not boundary. That difference matters. An inconvenience is something he can smooth over with a casual apology. A boundary is something he has to plan around. Darren liked apologies because they were cheaper than planning. So I started a folder on my computer called 118 Construction. Inside it, I made subfolders. Photos. Emails. Survey. City. I did not know yet that I would need all of them. But I knew enough not to leave everything scattered across text messages and camera roll thumbnails. The first few photos were almost boring. A truck across the driveway. A wheelbarrow track near the edge of the grass. A pile of trim leaning against the wrong side of the hedge. That is how most evidence starts. Small enough that the person causing it can call you dramatic. Clear enough that later, nobody can say it began out of nowhere. The second problem was the grass. The neighboring driveway was narrow, and the side yard between our houses was even narrower. Their crew wanted to move materials from the street to the back of the house, and the easiest path was not their driveway. It was the edge of my front yard. At first it was one wheelbarrow. Then two. Then a worker dragged a stack of trim boards across the grass and left gouges where the ends hit the ground. I took photos, but I did not make a scene. I sent another email. Please remind your crew not to use my front yard for access. I am attaching photos from today. Darren replied with a thumbs up emoji. That was not a response. That was a receipt. The third problem was the portable toilet. I came home from the grocery store and found it sitting partly on the strip of grass between the curb and my front walkway. Not on the flipper's lot. Not in their driveway. On the left front corner of my yard, close enough to my porch that I could smell the chemicals when the wind shifted. I stared at it for a full minute because I thought maybe I was misunderstanding the boundary. Then I pulled out my phone and took pictures from 3 angles. I called the number printed on the side. The rental company answered, and I gave them the unit number. The woman said that was placed for the property at 118 Meadow Lane. I said, this is 116 Meadow Lane. It's on my yard. She paused. The contractor directed placement. That sentence was going to matter later. I emailed Darren again. The portable toilet for your project has been placed on my property. Please have it moved onto your lot today. He did not answer. So I texted him, because he had given me his number on the first day. He replied, it's just near the line. Guys need it close. I wrote back, it is not near the line. It is on my property. He answered, we'll move it when the vendor comes back out. No date. No apology. No promise. I called the rental company again and asked whether I could request removal myself because the unit was on my property. The woman sounded sympathetic, but careful. She said the account belonged to the contractor, so she could not change placement without contractor authorization unless the unit created a public access issue. I asked if she could at least note my call. She said yes. I asked for the call reference number. There was a pause. Then she gave it to me. That tiny number became another receipt. Not because the rental company was the villain. They were not. They had placed a unit where a contractor told them to place it. But their note showed the date I objected, which mattered later when Darren tried to pretend everyone was relaxed about the placement until the sale started. That was when I opened the survey for the first time in years. The line between our properties ran straight back from a metal pin near the sidewalk. The pin was old, but it was still there, half buried under grass. According to the survey, the portable toilet was not almost on my property. It was almost 4 feet inside it. 4 feet does not sound like much until it is holding a toilet. I took a photo of the survey with my finger pointing to the boundary. I took a photo of the metal pin. I took a photo standing over the pin, aimed at the portable toilet. Then I sent all 3 to Darren. I also sent one to myself with the subject line, portable toilet across property line. That may sound strange, but it gave the photos a time-stamped place outside my phone. I have seen enough messy claims to know that people argue over dates when they cannot argue over pictures. My email to myself said one sentence. Photos taken today after Darren's stated unit was just near the line. It was not poetry. It was useful. The survey shows the unit is on my property. Please move it by 5 p.m. today. He called me instead of writing back. I did not answer. I wanted the next part in writing. He texted, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I replied, "Please move the unit off my property." It was moved the next morning, but not by much. They shifted it 2 or 3 feet, still partly across the line. That was the point where a normal person might walk over and yell. I am not saying yelling would have been wrong. I am saying it would have been useless. Darren did not think the line mattered. His crew did not think the line mattered. The rental company had followed the contractor's direction. If I kept arguing about where the grass looked like it belonged, I would stay in the same argument forever. So I changed the subject from grass to property. I called a local surveyor. The surveyor's name was Elise, and she told me she could come out the following Tuesday to locate the pins and mark the line. It would cost $380. I paid it. I also asked her one question before I booked. If someone has already crossed the line with equipment, is it worth marking? She said, "It is always worth marking before the next crossing." That was the cleanest advice anyone gave me during the whole mess. Before the next crossing. Because once the line was marked, nobody could say they did not know where it was. When Elise arrived, she wore a reflective vest and had the kind of calm voice that comes from telling angry homeowners disappointing facts for a living. She found the front pin, the rear pin, and one intermediate marker near the old hedge. She marked the line with bright pink flags and wooden stakes. The portable toilet was still over the line. So were 2 stacks of lumber. So were the tire marks from their wheelbarrows. Elise printed me a short letter confirming the boundary line as marked according to the recorded survey. She also gave me photos with the line marked in the frame. I sent Darren the letter. A licensed surveyor marked the property line today. Your portable toilet and materials remain on my property. Remove them by 5 p.m. tomorrow and instruct all workers not to enter my property. This time, he responded in email. Nora, I understand your concern, but we're in a tight construction phase. We will restore any disturbed grass after the project is complete. There it was. Not we are not on your property. Not your survey is wrong. Not we have permission. He had moved straight to we will fix it later. That was the sentence that turned a nuisance into a plan. Because if someone admits they are using your property and promises to fix it later, they have also admitted they know there is something to fix. I printed the email. Then I replied with language that felt stiff even as I typed it. You do not have permission to use any portion of 116 Meadow Lane for construction access, storage, staging, temporary sanitation, or equipment movement. Restoration after the project does not create permission to enter or damage the property. I read it 3 times before sending. Part of me felt ridiculous. I was a person in sweatpants typing staging and temporary sanitation from my kitchen table. But that was what the situation required. Darren had already shown me that normal language slid off him. Please move it. Please keep the driveway clear. Please tell your crew. None of that had worked. So I stopped writing like a neighbor and started writing like someone making a record. The next morning, at 7:42, I heard the sound that made my kitchen window vibrate. It was not a wheelbarrow. It was not a pickup truck. It was a skid loader. I walked to the front window and watched a compact skid loader roll over the curb, cross my front yard, and angle toward the side of the flipper house with a bucket full of broken concrete. The track sank into my lawn. Not a little. Deep, wet, ugly trenches across the front of the yard I had spent 4 years keeping clean. I opened the front door and shouted, "Stop. You are on my property." The operator looked at me through the cage, shrugged, and kept going. That shrug is burned into my memory. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was casual. He did not think he was doing something wrong. He thought I was in the way of something convenient. I recorded the second pass. By the time the skid loader crossed back, I had my phone out. I filmed the machine coming across the grass, over the marked boundary line, past the pink flags, and back toward the street. The video was only 21 seconds long. It was enough. I took still photos after that, because video shows motion, but photos show damage. I put a tape measure across the deepest rut and photographed the number. 4.5 inches at the worst point. I photographed the tread pattern. I photographed the pink survey flag bent sideways where the machine had brushed it. I photographed the mud pushed up along the edge like a little ridge. Then I walked to the sidewalk and took a wide shot that showed everything in one frame. My house number. The marked line. The tracks. The flipper house. That wide photo became one of the most useful images in the whole file because it made the excuse impossible. Nobody looking at it could say the loader had stayed on the other lot. It had crossed the line in the most visible way possible. I sent it to Darren. Your crew drove a skid loader across my front yard after the boundary was marked and after written notice not to enter my property. Do not enter my property again. He called twice. I did not answer. Then he texted, this is getting ridiculous. It's a yard. We said we'd fix it. I replied, do not enter my property again. He wrote, you don't own the whole strip. I sent the survey letter again. He wrote nothing after that. That afternoon, I went to the hardware store and bought 2 no trespassing signs. Plain black letters. White background. No clever wording. No threat. No joke. I put one near the sidewalk beside the front pin. I put the other near the side yard where their workers had been crossing. Then I printed a copy of the survey letter, slid it into a plastic sleeve, and taped it to a stake behind the sign. I also sent one more email. As of today, my property line has been marked by a licensed surveyor. No trespassing signs have been posted. No contractors, vehicles, equipment, materials, or rental units for 118 Meadow Lane are permitted on 116 Meadow Lane. Further entry will be documented. I copied myself. I copied the rental company. I copied the general email listed on the permit sign in their window. That last copy was important, because the permit sign had the contractor's license number. I had not thought about contractor licensing before this. I had never needed to. But the permit sign listed a company name, license number, permit number, and city inspection contact. It was sitting in their front window like a little menu of accountability. So I took a picture of that too. When someone puts a permit in a window, they are saying the work is under rules. I decided to believe them. The next 2 days were quiet. I thought maybe the signs had worked. Then it rained. The ground softened. The trenches from the skid loader filled with water. Mud started running from the damaged part of my yard toward the sidewalk and into the street. A pile of broken concrete on their side had been dumped too close to the line, and runoff carried gray slurry across the corner of my lawn. Now it was not only ugly. Now it was drainage. My father's old rule came back to me. Respect water flow. I took photos during the rain. I took photos after the rain. I took a short video showing water moving through the tire tracks and carrying mud toward the storm drain. Then I went to the city website. Our city had an online code enforcement complaint form. It had categories for construction debris, unpermitted work, stormwater runoff, damage to right-of-way, and unsafe site conditions. I did not choose all of them. I chose the ones I could prove. Construction debris and runoff. Improper placement of temporary sanitation. Damage crossing private property. I uploaded the photos, the skid loader video, the survey letter, and the email where Darren said they would restore disturbed grass after the project was complete. The form generated a case number. C22618. The city confirmation email had a line that made my shoulders drop for the first time in days. Your complaint has been received and assigned for review. It did not promise action. It did not say I was right. It did not threaten Darren. It just meant the issue no longer lived only between me and a man who thought we'll fix it later was permission. It now had a number. Numbers are harder to bully than neighbors. I wrote it down. I printed the confirmation. Then I taped a copy of the case number under the front no trespassing sign in a waterproof sleeve. That was the part Darren never forgave me for. Not the complaint. The sleeve. Because anyone walking up to the house next door could see it. No trespassing. Property line marked. City code KC 22618. It made the problem visible in a way a private email did not. The inspector came out 3 days later. His name was Malcolm. He parked in front of my house, took pictures from the sidewalk, and asked if he could stand on my side to photograph the tracks. That made me like him immediately. He asked permission before stepping on the property. I said yes. He photographed the tire ruts, the stakes, the portable toilet, the runoff marks, and the pile of debris near the line. Then he walked next door and knocked. No one answered. He left a yellow notice on their door. Before he left, Malcolm said, "Keep the line marked until this is resolved." I asked if the signs were allowed. He said, "On your property?" Yes. That one word made the signs feel different. Not aggressive. Allowed. I wrote that down too. That yellow paper changed everything. The next morning, Darren finally came over in person. I was watering the plants on my porch. He walked up the sidewalk, saw the no trespassing sign, and stopped just short of the stake. That was smart. He said, "Can we talk like adults?" I said, "You can email me." He laughed, but not because anything was funny. "You're going to make this into a whole thing?" I said, "There is already a city case." He looked at the sleeve under the sign. "You put the number out here?" I said, "It's a public case." He said, "Buyers don't need to see that." That was the first time he said buyers. The house was not even listed yet, at least not publicly. But now I knew the clock he cared about. Not my yard. Not the boundary. Not the city inspector. The sale. I said, "Then close the case." He said, "We can't close it while you're making it look like we did something criminal." I said, "The sign says no trespassing. The case number is the city's." He pointed at the ruts. "We'll fix the grass." I said, "You also need to keep your crew off my property." He said, "It's construction. Things happen." I said, "Not on my lot." Then I went inside. That conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. It was the last one I had with him face to face. After that, everything stayed in writing. The city issued a correction notice to 118 Meadow Lane. It required them to remove construction materials from any property not included in the permit, keep temporary facilities within the permitted site, prevent runoff from leaving the site, and restore damage caused by construction access. The notice gave them 7 days to submit a correction plan. Darren forwarded me nothing. I got my copy from the city portal because C22618 was linked to my complaint. The correction notice did not say my name. That was one of the best things about it. It did not need my feelings. It did not need my tone. It did not need to know whether I was being difficult or whether Darren was a nice guy under pressure. It said what had to be corrected. It also created a deadline. That was the part Darren could not ignore. He had treated my emails like optional friction because I had no closing date attached to them. The city notice had a date, a case number, and a portal where non-compliance could sit in public. I did not have to make him care. The schedule did it for me. The crew moved the portable toilet that afternoon. All the way onto their driveway this time. The lumber stacks disappeared from my side of the line. Someone put orange mesh near the marked boundary. For about 4 days, everyone behaved like property lines had been invented. Then the listing went live. I knew because my friend sent it to me before breakfast. "Isn't this next door to you?" There it was. Fresh paint. New floors. White kitchen. Black fixtures. A description that used the phrase thoughtfully updated 3 times. It also said oversized lot feel. That line made me stare at the screen. The lot was not oversized. It only felt oversized when their crew used mine. I took a screenshot of the listing, including the date, the price, and the first open house time. Not because I wanted to attack the sale. Because the moment a property goes public, everything around it becomes timing. Darren had been able to drag his feet while the renovation was private. Now the clock was visible. The photos were careful. None of them showed my no trespassing sign. None of them showed the damaged part of my yard. None of them showed the orange mesh, the city notice, or the side yard. But buyers do not tour houses through listing photos alone. The first open house was scheduled for Saturday. On Friday afternoon, a real estate agent I had never met knocked on my door. She wore cream-colored heels that sank slightly into the edge of my damaged grass. She introduced herself as Melissa, the listing agent for the property next door. I did not invite her inside. She smiled too hard and said, "I understand there has been some construction friction." Friction. That was a new word for trespass. I said, "There is an open code enforcement case." Her smile tightened. "Right. That's actually why I'm here. We have showings starting tomorrow, and the sign up front could confuse buyers." I said, "Which sign?" She looked at it. There were only two signs in my yard. The one that said "No Trespassing," and the printed city case number beneath it. She said, "That one." I said, "The sign is on my property." She said, "Of course. But visually, because the homes are close together, people may think it relates to the listing." I said, "It does relate to the listing." She blinked. I said, "The case is about construction activity from that property entering mine." She lowered her voice. "Has this been disclosed?" I did not answer that, because it was not my job to manage her disclosure problem. I said, "You should ask your client." She left after that. She looked at the sign again, then at the damaged grass, then at the house she was trying to sell. For the first time, I saw the calculation happen in someone else's face. Not whether I had been wronged. Whether the wrong was now visible enough to cost money. That was when I understood why people like Darren prefer private apologies. Private apologies keep the problem small. Public records make everyone decide whether they want to stand near it. I thought that was the end of it. It was not. Saturday morning, cars started arriving at 10:45. By 11 o'clock, there were 5 vehicles on the street. People walked up the neighboring driveway, glanced at my sign, looked at the pink survey flags, then looked back at the house. I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee and said nothing. Several people slowed down to read the sleeve. One man took a picture of it. Melissa stood near the front door pretending not to notice. At 11:22, my phone buzzed. It was Darren. "Take down the sign during the open house." I did not reply. At 11:31, he texted again. "You're interfering with a sale." I replied, "The sign is on my property and reflects an open city case." He wrote, "You're doing this on purpose." I wrote, "I posted it after your crew entered my property with equipment after written notice." He did not answer. At 12:04, Melissa walked over again. This time, she did not smile. She said, "My client authorized me to offer you $500 if you can remove the sign for the weekend." That was the moment from the beginning. The buyer was 10 minutes away, and the realtor offered me $500 to take down a sign that said "No Trespassing." I asked, "Will the city case be closed this weekend?" She said, "No, but the sign is creating an impression." I said, "The impression is accurate." She said, "The yard will be repaired." I said, "Then the sign can come down when the record closes." She looked at me like I had personally invented paperwork. "It's just a sign." I said, "Then it should not be worth $500. She left. I saved the text offer, because of course the $500 was not really about a sign. It was about optics. If the sign were false, they would have threatened me. If the sign were irrelevant, they would have ignored it. Offering money told me the sign was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. It was making buyers ask the question Darren had avoided for weeks. What happened on that property line? The buyer arrived. A couple, maybe late 30s, with a man who looked like their agent. They noticed the sign immediately. The buyer's agent looked at it, looked at my yard, then looked at Melissa. I could not hear the whole conversation from my porch, but I heard one sentence clearly. "Is this an active code case?" Melissa said something too low for me to catch. The showing lasted 8 minutes. They left without going into the backyard. That afternoon, someone removed the listing's open house post from the agency's social page. I did not celebrate. I took another photo of the sign, the flags, and the damaged grass, because by then I had learned that if it was not documented, someone would later pretend it had been smaller. On Monday, the city portal updated. Correction plan rejected. Reason: insufficient restoration detail and no written acknowledgement of property boundary restrictions. I read that line twice. No written acknowledgement of property boundary restrictions. That was the cleanest line in the entire case. Darren had been trying to treat the property line like a mood. The city treated it like a condition. He did not have to like me. He did not have to agree that I was reasonable. He did not have to admit he had been rude. He had to write down how his project would stop crossing onto my lot. That was the city saying, in clean government language, that Darren needed to admit the line existed and plan around it. By Wednesday, I received an email from his contractor. Not Darren. The contractor. It said they had scheduled a landscaping company to repair the damaged area, remove contaminated soil if needed, regrade the runoff path, and lay new sod. They also attached a site access plan showing all workers and equipment would remain within 118 Meadow Lane. I almost laughed at the phrase site access plan. 3 weeks earlier, they had acted like a front yard was a suggestion. Now they had a map. The landscaping crew came the following Monday. They stayed on their side until the foreman knocked on my door and asked for permission to step onto my lawn to repair it. I asked him to put that in a text. He did. Then I said yes. That was the whole difference. Permission before entry. Written scope before work. Repair before sale. Nothing about that was impossible. Nothing about it required a feud. It required the one thing Darren had refused to give at the beginning, acknowledgement that my yard was not part of his project. The work took most of the day. They filled the ruts, graded the edge, cleaned the runoff marks, and replaced a section of grass. It looked too new compared with the rest of the lawn, but at least it was no longer a mud track. The city inspector came back 2 days later. He walked the line. He checked the portable toilet placement. He checked the debris pile. He photographed the restored area. Then he asked if I had any objection to closing the case. I said, if the record notes that the property line issue was corrected and no further access is permitted, I have no objection. He nodded. The portal updated the next morning. KC 22618 closed after correction. I printed it. Of course I printed it. That afternoon, I took down the no trespassing sign in the front yard. I left the side yard sign up because I liked the way it reminded people to think before taking shortcuts. Darren never apologized. Melissa never came back. The house sold 6 weeks later for less than the original asking price. I do not know how much of that was because of me, because of the market, because of the rushed renovation, or because buyers noticed a code case that had been open during the first weekend. I do know the sale did not move on Darren's schedule. That was enough. People sometimes expect revenge stories to end with a person ruined, fired, arrested, or humiliated in front of a crowd. This was quieter than that. The closing moved. The asking price dropped. The work had to be corrected. The case had to be closed. The line had to be acknowledged in writing. For a flipper, time is not emotional. Time is carrying cost. Time is loan interest. Time is insurance, utilities, taxes, staging, price reductions, and buyers wondering what else was rushed. Darren did not lose because I yelled louder. He lost because the shortcut stopped being short. And I know he paid for a survey response, site access plan, sod, grading, cleanup, and at least one delayed open house because he did not want to respect a line that had been on paper the whole time. Some people think property rights are rude when they are inconvenient. They are not. They are just quiet until someone crosses them. A month after the house sold, the new owner moved in. Her name was Leah. On her second day, she walked over and said, "I think I owe you an awkward question." I said, "Probably." She pointed at the side yard sign. "Do I need to know something?" I told her the short version. Contractor crossed the line. City case opened. Damage repaired. Case closed. She looked embarrassed, even though none of it was her fault. Then she said, the seller's disclosure mentioned a resolved code issue with the adjacent property line. My agent told me to ask about it after closing. After closing. That part did not surprise me. But it did make me glad I had kept everything clean. If Leah had come over angry, I could show her the record without sounding like I was trying to recruit her into an old fight. The city case was closed. The photos were dated. The repair was done. The survey was plain. I was not asking her to take my side. I was showing her where the side was. I showed her the survey line, the stakes I had left near the hedge, and the closing email from the city. She thanked me and said she wanted no trouble. I told her neither did I. Then I said something I wish Darren had understood in the beginning. Ask first, and we will probably be fine. Leah did ask. When she had a fence company come out later that summer, she texted me the day before. When the installer needed to stand on my side for 5 minutes to measure, he knocked and waited. When they finished, they left the yard exactly as they found it. It was that easy. The line had never been the problem. The problem was the people who thought the line only mattered if I was loud enough. I still have the old sign in my garage. It is leaning between a bag of potting soil and the file cabinet where I keep the survey. Sometimes I see it when I am doing laundry, and I remember Melissa standing in my yard with $500 in her voice, asking me to make a public record invisible for a weekend. I did not take the money. The sign came down when the record closed.